Human fighter battles alien blood pits to save captive ambassador and her lethal Azurian guardian. Crimson splattered across the cockpit's glass as Mason's fist collided with the Cernac's jaw. The blow landed with a sickening crunch, the alien's thick, scaled skin no match for the rage behind Mason's knuckles. The towering mercenary sagged sideways, a hiss of pain escaping through a mouthful of blue ichor and jagged, tusked teeth. Mason's knuckles throbbed, but he ignored the pain, fixing the Cernak with a glare cold enough to freeze Starfire. "Last chance," Mason growled, voice gravelly and low as he pressed in, lowering his bloodied hand. The Cernac's chest heaved, thick arms trembling where they hung. Mason's knife glinted in the flickering cockpit light, the blade's edge stained with memory. "Where are they taking the ambassador?" The Cernak spat, a broken tusk clattering against the grated deck with a wet clink. Blue blood pooled beneath his chin. He met Mason's stare with defiant, slitted eyes. "Go ahead, kill me," he snarled, lips peeling back from bloodied fangs. "The blood pits pay more than you ever could." Mason shook his head, the memory of old wounds pulsing in his mind. "You had your chance." In one swift, practiced motion, he drove the knife home, slicing deep. The Cernac's snarl faded to a gurgle, then to silence. Mason wiped the blade clean on the mercenary's ragged vest and turned to the navigation console, fingers moving with efficient urgency. The screen flickered, displaying a set of coordinates, precisely what he'd suspected. Vera. The word alone was a curse, conjuring images of poisoned skies and the lawless, neon-splattered city of Gossamer. A world where the powerful paid to watch others bleed. His wrist comm vibrated, emitting a faint hum. Mason pressed it, and a cold blue hologram shimmered above his arm. His handler appeared, pale, severe, eyes like ice beneath a military-cut fringe. "Report, Mason," the handler ordered, tone clipped. "Coordinates to Vera. Confirmation that Ambassador Lyra is alive. The bounty just doubled." Mason's voice betrayed nothing, though his jaw clenched. "The Azurian Accord is unraveling without her," the handler replied, her image flickering as she leaned forward. "If she doesn't sign, the peace collapses." Mason's lips twisted, disdain threading through his words. "I'm not here for politics. I'm here for the payout. That's why we trust you. No attachments." A pause, the handler's gaze flickering with something almost human. "One more thing. Intelligence says her bodyguard is already on Vera. Blue-skinned, crest of black quills, tactical armor. Approach with caution. Those Azurians are lethal." "Understood," Mason said, cutting the link. The hologram vanished, leaving only the spatter of blood on the console and the echo of old memories. He stared at the crimson smear, knuckles white. He'd lied. This wasn't just about credits. It was about chains and the roar of the crowd, the stench of fear and blood in the pit. If Lyra was bound for Vera, she was headed for the death games, and Mason had a score to settle with the man who ran them. 3 days later, Mason's ship dropped through Vera's murky atmosphere. The engines whined in protest as he threaded the toxic haze, chemical clouds swirling past the pitted hull. Below, the city of Gossamer sprawled, a chaotic tangle of lights, towers, and filth. Neon signs flickered atop crumbling spires, their glare barely piercing the smog. Mason sat down in a private hangar, the credits for the rental already laundered and untraceable. The air outside bit at his lungs, thick with chemicals and desperation. He activated his filter implant and checked the charge on his concealed pistol before stepping into the frenetic current of the city. The streets teemed with every species imaginable: hulking Thraxians trading illegal weapons, spindle-limbed Lyricians hawking narcotics, humans lurking in shadowed alcoves, and creatures Mason couldn't even name. Slave auctions unfolded in the open, laughter and screams mingling in the stagnant air. He kept his head low, eyes alert, and slipped into the Broken Fang, a bar carved from the bones of an old freighter. The place reeked of stale alcohol and old violence. The bartender, a squat, six-eyed grell with skin the color of mold, glanced up as Mason entered. "Back again, human," the grell croaked, his voice oozing suspicion. "Not by choice," Mason replied, sliding a data chit across the sticky counter. "I need info. High-value prisoners bound for the pits." The grell's six eyes narrowed to slits. "Dangerous questions. Voss Karn doesn't like people snooping." Mason leaned in, voice a venomous whisper. "Voss Karn can burn, and I'll see to it if he stands in my way." A tense pause stretched, broken only by the hum of the bar's broken lighting. Finally, the grell relented, scooping up the chit. "There's a special event coming. Something rare from the Azurian Accord. Karn's been bragging to his clients." Mason's eyes hardened. "Where is she?" "The Apex. Maximum lockdown. Only Karn's inner circle gets in. Also, word is, her bodyguard is already here. Blue skin, black crest, glowing eyes. Karn's hunters are after her." Mason felt his pulse quicken. The bodyguard. Azurian. Lethal. Complication. Or opportunity. He spent hours weaving through the city, following rumors and whispers, trading credits and favors for snatches of information. The trail led him to the outskirts, a crumbling refinery, swallowed by shadow and the stink of rust and ozone. He paused outside, every sense on edge. Something was off. The air shifted, a faint electric hum barely audible over the city's distant drone. Instinct screamed. Mason dropped, rolling aside as a blade of pure energy sliced through the space where his neck had just been, searing a line across the metal wall behind him. She moved with predatory grace, tall and formidable, 7 feet of lean muscle and blue skin, her veins glowing faintly beneath battered tactical armor. Black quills fanned out from her scalp, framing a face both beautiful and fierce. Her eyes, amber and unblinking, locked on him with lethal intent. Mason dodged another slash, his own blade flashing into his hand. He didn't attack, just parried, letting her momentum carry her forward. "I'm not your enemy," he called, ducking as she spun, her blade carving a sizzling arc inches from his face. "You're human," she spat, voice edged with hatred. "Your kind profits from the pits." She lunged again, blindingly fast. Mason caught her wrist, twisting her until her back pressed against his chest. His blade hovered at her throat, her energy weapon, still humming, pressed into his ribs. For a breathless moment neither moved, both trembling on the edge of violence. "Name's Mason. I'm here for Ambassador Lyra." She tensed in his grasp, muscles coiling beneath his arm. "Why would a human care about an Azurian diplomat?" "Because I'm paid to care," he lied, releasing her and stepping back, blade lowered. "And because I know where she's being held." She sized him up, suspicion burning in her luminous eyes, blade never wavering. "I am Zephyra, first shield to Ambassador Lyra of Azuria. If you're lying, I'll end you." "She's in the Apex, being prepped for Karn's games. Security's tight, but I have a way in." Zephyra hesitated, her gaze hard as diamond. "What's your price, mercenary?" Mason's jaw set, old scars tightening. "Let's just say I have unfinished business in that arena." Toxic dawn painted gossamer in sickly gold. In the half-light, the city looked like a fever dream, spires and catwalks melting into the haze. Mason stood by the window of his safe house, watching Zephyra pace, a storm barely contained by flesh and armor. She moved with the tight, coiled energy of a predator waiting for its cage to open, her footsteps almost silent but relentless. "The Apex has 30 layers of security," Mason said, pulling up a floating hologram that rippled blue against the battered wall. He flicked through overlays, sentry drones, gene locks, multi-species guards, anti-teleport grids. The fortress was a masterpiece of paranoia. Zephyra's amber gaze swept over the shifting plans, every detail absorbed and catalogued. "You know a lot about a fortress you shouldn't," she said, the words edged with suspicion. Mason shrugged, keeping his tone light. "It's my job to know what others don't." "And yet you won't say why," she pressed, stepping closer, the sharp scent of ozone and something wilder lingering between them. "My reasons aren't important for getting your ambassador out," Mason countered, eyes never leaving the security schematic. "Everything about you is important if I'm to trust you with her life." Zephyra's voice was low and urgent now, the faintest tremor of desperation beneath her calm. She stopped just short of him, her presence overwhelming, electric. "Lyra is more than a diplomat. She carries our ancestral code. Without her, our unity fractures." "So she's everything to your people," Mason murmured. "Yes." Zephyra's lips pressed together in a line of old pain. "Humans never understood." "They rarely do," Mason agreed quietly, a shadow passing through his expression. He zoomed in on the arena's belly, the floor where blood and hope pooled together. "Politics aside, she's scheduled for the main event in 4 days. Karn keeps his prizes alive until then." His voice was clinical, but the word prizes made Zephyra flinch. "How do we get inside?" Her fists clenched at her sides, ready to carve a path through steel and flesh. "We don't break in. We're invited." Mason called up a new data stream: fight brackets, betting odds, faces of killers and legends. "Preliminaries for the championship start tomorrow. Winner gets a private meeting with Karn." Zephyra's eyes narrowed, seeing the shape of his plan. "You plan to fight. I'll enter. You'll pose as my handler." "Can you hide your glow?" Mason asked, scrutinizing the faint blue aura that danced beneath her skin. Zephyra closed her eyes. Slowly, the light faded, leaving only her eyes burning with otherworldly fire. "I can for a while, but scanners will know." "I've got that covered." Mason reached into a battered case and handed her a biosignature scrambler. "It'll sting." Zephyra took it without hesitation, pressing the cold metal to her wrist. The device bit into her skin and she didn't so much as flinch. Pain is irrelevant. For a moment her gaze lingered on him, intense enough to peel away armor. "If you betray me, you'll beg for mercy." Mason almost smiled, a flicker of something soft in his eyes. "You've said that. Rest up. Tomorrow, we walk into the jaws." Night and Gossamer crawled by in fits and starts. Screams, laughter, and the constant thrum of distant generators. Mason barely slept, replaying old battles behind his eyelids. At dawn, they joined the stream of bodies winding toward the arena district. The crowd was a river of greed and violence, gamblers and handlers in a motley parade, every species jostling for position. "Stay close," Mason murmured, eyes scanning for threats. Zephyra, disguised in a heavy cloak, kept her crest flattened and her skin a muted gray-blue. Her eyes, however, could not be dimmed. They sparked beneath her hood. "These people," she muttered, looking around with contempt, "they worship violence." "Focus," Mason replied, though his voice betrayed a hint of shared disgust. He had no love for these crowds. They reached the check-in, a corrugated steel booth manned by a bored insectoid whose chitinous face flickered with disinterest. "Name and species?" It droned, antennae barely twitching. "Mason, human, solo." Mason replied, sliding forged credentials across. The official's mandibles clicked in surprise. "Humans usually enter as slaves." "I'm not most humans," Mason said, deadpan. The insectoid tapped a display. "Unrestricted combat. Death waiver?" Mason pressed his thumb to the screen, leaving a smear of DNA. "Signed. Handler?" the insectoid asked, gesturing. Mason handed over Zephyra's credentials. The official glanced at her, eyes lingering a second too long. Keep her close. Pretty ones vanish. Mason's hand hovered near his concealed pistol. She's not for sale. The insectoid snorted, unimpressed, and stamped their entry papers. Bay 9, Win 3, move up. As they slipped away from the booth, Zephyra leaned close, voice barely above a whisper. You've done this before. Once, Mason replied, the word heavy. As a fighter or a prize? Zephyra asked, eyes boring into him. He said nothing, the silence answer enough. Bay 9 was a cavernous prep area, filled with fighters of every conceivable shape and origin. Some sharpened blades or checked plasma packs. Others sat in silent meditation, tattoos flickering with bioluminescence. The air was thick with sweat and anticipation. Zephyra's attention snapped to a monitor mounted in the corner, where Ambassador Lyra's image flickered. Lyra sat in a cell of transparent alloy, regal even in captivity. Her posture unbowed, her silver-blue hair perfectly arranged, her gaze unwavering. The sight seemed to shore up Zephyra's resolve, her fingers flexing as if itching for a weapon. Be ready, Mason told her, pulling on battered gauntlets. If I win, Karn will notice. The preliminary arena was nothing more than a pit. Sand and steel, stains of ancient blood beneath the flicker of artificial lights. The walls climbed high, lined with cages, every seat occupied by a screaming face. The noise was a living thing. Human, to the center! The announcer boomed, voice amplified by ancient speakers. Mason strode forward, feeling every eye in the arena crawl over him. Humans rarely volunteered for this spectacle. They were usually forced. He rolled his shoulders, scanning the gates as the rules were recited. A brutal formality. Zephyra stood in the handler's box, posture rigid, hands clenched. Her eyes followed Mason with a focus that cut through the roar of the crowd. Beneath the hood, her lips moved in silent calculation, weighing every move, every threat. The first challenge: survive 3 foes. The gates opened with a shriek of tortured metal. From the left, a 6-limbed predator stalked into the light, its skin mottled and armored, claws serrated and dripping with venom. Its elongated skull bristled with sensory pits, and its jaw split in 4 directions as it released a roar that rattled teeth. From the right, a reptilian brute lumbered forward, scales gleaming, tail as thick as a tree trunk, spikes jutting from its back. It hissed, tongue flicking over broken fangs. From the center, a cyborg strode in, half machine, half flesh, arms ending in plasma blades that shimmered with deadly heat. Its mechanical eye glowed, scanning Mason with algorithmic malice. Mason drew his knife, the weapon feeling small but familiar in his grip. The crowd roared, betting odds surging. The predator moved first, claws flashing in a blur. Mason rolled aside, feeling the air part as a talon slashed past his ear. He came up fast, driving the knife into the beast's hind leg. Blue blood spattered across his boots as the predator shrieked and spun. The reptile charged, tail whipping in a deadly arc. Mason dove, sliding beneath the brute, slashing at its underbelly. Pain blossomed in his shoulder as the cyborg's plasma bolt grazed him, cauterizing as it burned. He gritted his teeth, sweat stinging his eyes, and forced himself to his feet. Zephyra's hands twitched toward her hidden weapon, but she held back, trusting his skill. Or at least, his luck. The predator lunged again, jaws snapping. Mason ducked under its open maw, thrusting his knife up through the roof of its mouth. The blade punched into brain, and the beast collapsed in a heap, twitching. No time to breathe. The reptile whipped its tail, trying to catch him off guard. Mason caught the spiked appendage with both hands, grunting with effort, and used its own momentum to flip the creature across the sand, right into the path of the charging cyborg. Metal and scales tangled as they collided. Mason was on them in a heartbeat. He rammed his knife through a seam in the reptile's skull, then yanked the plasma blade from the cyborg's hand. Sparks exploded as he drove the blade into the cyborg's chest, severing circuits and bone. A hush fell as the bodies stilled, then the crowd erupted. Mason stood in the center of the pit, chest heaving, blood, his and theirs, dripping from his hands. "Victor! Mason! Human!" the announcer declared, voice triumphant. He glanced up at Zephyra in the handler's box. Her expression was unreadable, but her eyes burned with pride and with hope. The games had only just begun. Mason returned to the handler's box, the sound of the crowd still echoing in his bones. Zephyra watched him, her face an impassive mask, but her eyes were sharp, calculating, burning with a focused intensity that cut through the din. "You fight like someone who's survived this before," she murmured, her voice low enough to vanish beneath the arena's roar. Mason wiped blood from his blade, movement steady and practiced. "I never said I hadn't." She studied him, not satisfied with half-truths. "You're holding back." He slid the knife home into its sheath, eyes flicking to her concealed blade beneath her cloak. "So are you," he countered. "You almost intervened out there." Zephyra's lips twitched in a hint of a smile, more predator than friend. "Instinct. My duty is to protect." He didn't argue. That unspoken promise hung between them as the officials signaled the next match. Mason forced himself to breathe, to focus on the present, not on the ghosts clawing at the edges of his mind. 2 more victories followed in the sand and steel of the pit, Mason never revealing his full strength, always measuring his movements to draw out the fight. Enough to impress, not enough to betray his secrets. Zephyra watched each round from the handler's box, her gaze unwavering, her fingers curling and uncurling, as if she longed to shatter the glass and join him. After the third match, while Mason cleaned crimson from his knuckles and caught his breath, a sharply dressed grell approached, its carapace gleaming, silks draping its narrow shoulders. "Impressive," it said in a sibilant tone, offering a data slate. "Karn invites you to the main arena. Tomorrow's qualifiers. You have done well to survive." "My handler comes too," Mason said, voice brooking no refusal. The grell gave a shallow bow, compound eyes glinting. "Of course, the invitation is extended to both." They were escorted through a labyrinth of secure corridors, boots echoing on glassy black floors. Zephyra's implant hummed softly at her wrist, biosignature concealed by alien tech and grit. The Apex's interior was a study in opulence: polished glass, flowing water, flickering holographic art, and silent servitors tending to battered champions and fresh meat alike. "Your suite," the grell announced, gesturing to a door inset with gold filigree. Inside, the room was all soft light and excessive luxury, a wall of glass overlooking the city, a bed fit for royalty, a shower that misted with soothing minerals. The grell's antennae twitched. "Rest, tomorrow will test you." The door slid shut, sealing them inside. Zephyra immediately set to work, moving with efficient precision. She swept the suite for surveillance, peeling back panels, brushing her fingers along the seams of the ceiling, checking the mirrors. 6 cameras, 2 mics, she reported, voice barely audible. Mason pulled a compact jammer from his boot and flicked it on. A soft pulse spread through the suite. 2 minutes, make them count. Zephyra nodded, her eyes hard with purpose. "She's 3 levels up. I sensed her near the lifts. Security's thickest there. Multiple guards, gene locks, anti-teleport fields. Lyra is isolated, but alive." Mason nodded, checking the edge of his blade. "Tomorrow's matches will get Karn's attention, if I survive." Zephyra's concern slipped through her composure, coloring her words with warmth. "You will." But the risk, the jammer beeped, warning of time. Mason switched it off with a click. Rest. Tomorrow we see if I'm championship material. Their eyes met in the hush that followed. A silent, electric moment. Something unspoken passed between them. Hope. Fear. The sense that the line between survival and something more was growing thin. The next day dawned with a new, metallic edge. The main arena dwarfed the others. Tiers of seats stretched up into shadow, a roaring ocean of faces circling the blood-stained floor. The sound was overwhelming, a wall of noise that pressed against the bones. In the locker room, Mason checked his weapons. Knife, garrote wire, a single hidden shock charge. Zephyra stood behind him, focused, every movement an act of control. "Your foe is a Varkal," she said, reviewing the roster on a stolen datapad. "Regenerates fast. Too fast." Mason finished strapping on his battered chest plate. "Strike the neural node at the spine," he replied. "Drops them cold." Zephyra frowned, suspicion knitting her brow. "How do you know so much about alien anatomy?" Mason looked away. "I wasn't always a mercenary." A buzzer sounded, summoning him to the pit. "Wait," Zephyra said, reaching out. She adjusted a strap on his armor, her fingers brushing his collarbone, gentle and lingering. "Be careful." The contact sent a jolt through him, unexpected and intimate. For a heartbeat, the arena, the crowds, the danger, all faded. He met her eyes and in them saw more than duty. Then the moment passed, swept away by the relentless tide of survival. Mason stepped into the light. The Varkal waited in the center, a hulking mass of muscle and sinew, 4 arms swinging in anticipation. Its face was a tapestry of scars, tusks jutting from a snarling mouth. The crowd bellowed, hungry for spectacle. The Varkal charged, all fury and speed, swinging with the force of a landslide. Mason dodged the first blow, spinning aside, slashing at the base of its skull. The wound closed instantly, flesh knitting before his eyes. The Varkal grinned, arms coming down in a flurry. Mason felt a rib crack as one arm connected, pain flaring hot. He gritted his teeth, danced back, waited for the monster to overreach. On the next swing, Mason feinted low, then dove behind, driving his blade deep into the neural node at the base of the spine, a move born of memory and necessity. The Varkal spasmed, eyes wide in surprise, then dropped with a heavy crash that shook the sand. The arena erupted, the crowd's roar shaking the walls. Far above, in a private box wreathed in shadow and wealth, Voskarn leaned forward, interest gleaming in his pale eyes. Mason barely caught his breath before he was ushered into the next match. 2 more brutal contests followed, one against a pair of scaled twins wielding chain axes, another against a cybernetic beast bristling with razors and venom injectors. Each time, Mason's movements grew more deliberate, his exhaustion mounting. But he prevailed, never showing the depth of his reserves. During the last match, Zephyra slipped away, moving through the labyrinthine corridors with a grace that drew no attention. She blended with handlers and servitors, her senses straining for the faint thread of Lyra's presence. Mason finished off the cybernetic beast, sparks flying as metal and flesh tore apart beneath his blade. He stood, battered and bloodied as a protocol drone hovered down. "Mason, Karn requests your presence at tonight's preview," it intoned in a mechanical monotone. "Your handler is being screened." Later, back in the suite, Mason found Zephyra waiting, tension radiating from her in silent waves. She paced, eyes flicking to the door, then to Mason. "They're keeping her in isolation," Zephyra said, voice tight. "I sensed her during screening. Did they suspect me?" Mason shook his head. "No, but your DNA is in their system now." She stilled, alarm flaring in her gaze. How? He held her eyes, the words coming heavy. I was prisoner 1138. 5 years ago, I spent a year in Karn's pits before I escaped. Zephyra's breath caught. You were a slave. Mason's mouth twisted, old pain surfacing. Now Karn's invited his escaped property to his private show, alongside the ambassador. We're the entertainment. Zephyra stepped closer, her hand finding his. In that quiet, their shared purpose became unspoken truth. Whatever tomorrow brought, they would face it together. Two survivors, standing against the darkness. The Apex's executive level glittered with obscene wealth. Polished obsidian floors reflected chandeliers of crystallized gas, and translucent walls shifted hue with the faintest touch. Mason and Zephyra moved through it, flanked by silent, armored guards, each one more machine than sentient. Their covers held, mercenary and handler, cool and inscrutable, but both felt the weight of countless eyes, measured and hungry. Voss Karn approached, his carapace so highly polished it caught the glow of the floating lights, refracting shards of blue and violet across the room. His elongated fingers, adorned with rings of bone and steel, tapped together in a rhythm that spoke of barely contained excitement. His compound eyes regarded them with glacial calculation. Your victories have drawn attention, Karn intoned, his voice a dry hiss that carried above the muted hum of conversation. Humans rarely impress. Mason bowed with practiced deference, lowering his gaze but never taking his senses from the threat. Honored, Master Karn. Karn's attention slid to Zephyra, lingering on the faint tracery of glowing blue beneath her skin, the subtle quill marks just visible at her hairline. Unusual markings. Genetic quirk? Zephyra's expression didn't flicker. Inherited, she replied, tone cool as Arctic glass. Karn smiled, thin and predatory, and beckoned them forward. He led the way into a vast lounge overlooking a glass chamber, where tiers of seats encircled a central stage. The elite of Gossamer gathered here. Jeweled nobles, cartel bosses, alien dignitaries, all waiting for the night's spectacle. Crystal decanters glowed with forbidden liquors, and servers in golden masks offered platters of delicacies that squirmed or smoked. Tonight's preview, a true Azurian, Karn declared, his voice amplified by hidden speakers. All eyes turned as a platform rose from the center of the glass chamber. Ambassador Lyra stood tall, her blue skin radiant, bioluminescent veins flickering beneath ceremonial robes that had been altered, made tighter, brighter, more display than dignity. Zephyra stiffened at Mason's side, her hand drifting toward the hilt of her hidden blade, tension shimmering off her in waves. Mason's hand brushed hers, a silent warning. Not yet. Karn continued, relishing the attention. Her kind's bioluminescence is legendary. When provoked, it's a living light show. He gestured, and a pair of drones hovered near Lyra, shining spotlights over her. She lifted her chin, refusing to be cowed, her glow intensifying in defiance. Mason squeezed Zephyra's hand, his touch grounding her, urging patience. He could feel the storm in her muscles, the urge to leap, to save. And now, the main event, Karn announced, his voice lowering for dramatic effect. Prisoner 1138 returned at last. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Murmurs spread, eyes turning to Mason. Karn's mandibles clicked in satisfaction. Did you think I'd forget your face? He said, stepping closer. Your fighting style is unique, impossible to mistake. Mason met his gaze without fear. I was counting on it. Karn's smile widened, cold and appreciative. I admire that. Then admire this, Mason said, nodding to Zephyra. In a blur, Zephyra moved, her concealed blade activated, the edge flaring with blue energy as she cut down the nearest guard in a single, silent arc. Chaos rippled through the chamber. Mason drew his pistol and fired a single shot into the control panel near the door, sending sparks cascading and alarms blaring. Karn hissed and vanished behind a shuddering energy shield. Security golems deployed from hidden alcoves, but Mason didn't hesitate. He slammed the butt of his pistol against the glass barrier separating the lounge from the chamber below. The first impact only cracked it, but the second shattered the pane, and Mason vaulted through, shards spinning around him. He landed hard on the platform beside Lyra. Zephyra followed, carving a path through the confusion, her blade a streak of light and death. As Karn's security field sputtered and died, she landed in a crouch, already scanning for threats. "First shield," Lyra said, relief and pride warring in her eyes. "Your timing is perfect." "Reunion later, escape now," Mason snapped, raising his pistol and firing at the advancing security droids. Lyra moved with them, keeping low, dignity never faltering despite the chaos. Together, they pressed toward the exit. They fought their way through the service corridors. Mason's shots were precise, dropping guards with clinical efficiency. Zephyra moved in tandem, her blade humming as it cut through armor and flesh alike. Lyra stayed between them, her bioluminescence pulsing in warning with every danger. But reinforcements were closing in. More guards, heavier weapons, and the ever-present threat of Karn's traps. At a junction, Mason made a split-second choice, veering left into a narrow, hazardous maintenance shaft. He slammed the door behind them and jammed the controls. Inside the shaft, darkness pressed in, punctuated only by the glow from Zephyra's skin. Mason braced himself against the trembling door. "Why announce you instead of ambushing us?" Zephyra asked, breath quick, as she helped drag a heavy crate to barricade the entrance. "He wants more than revenge," Mason said, scanning the ceiling for alternate exits. "He wants a collection." Lyra looked up sharply, her eyes narrowed. "A collection?" "Karn collects rarities," Mason explained, voice grim. "An Azurian leader, an escaped human champion, a bodyguard with energy powers. He parades his trophies for the elite." Zephyra flexed her hands. Sparks leapt between her fingers. Lyra touched Zephyra's arm, her own bioluminescence flaring with concern. "Your hands, Zephyra," Lyra said softly. Mason nodded, confirming Lyra's suspicion. A living conduit. He used Lyra as bait, knowing her shield would come. Lyra's gaze softened with understanding. "You came for both of us." Mason's mouth twitched in a wry smile. "Couldn't leave you in the collection." An explosion shook the door, dust and metal fragments raining down. The barricade wouldn't last. Then, from the shadows behind a broken panel, a ragged human woman emerged. Her eyes darted between them, wild with urgency. "Quick, this way," she whispered. "I'm Sarah. Maintenance tech. Karn took everything from me. This is payback." She gestured for them to follow, leading them into a maze of service tunnels crisscrossed with steam pipes and sparking wires. They moved fast, ducking security sweeps and crawling through spaces barely wide enough to breathe. "I can get you through," Sarah promised as she led them deeper. "But we'll have to cross the secondary arena. It's the only way out to the city's lower levels." Mason hesitated, weighing the risk. Sarah's voice cracked. "Please. They have my family. I help you. You help me. That's the deal." He saw the desperation in her face, one he'd worn himself once. He nodded. "I'd do the same." But before they could reach the far exit, Karn's guards dropped from the shadows, weapons raised. "Disarm them. Prepare the arena," barked a squad leader. Mason reacted instantly, firing at the nearest guard. He dropped 2, then 3, before a stun blast caught him in the chest. His muscles seized, his vision filled with white sparks, and he crashed to the floor. Zephyra fought on, blade whirling in deadly arcs. She cut through armor and flesh, refusing to yield. But the guards were ready. They activated a containment field, and blue energy caged her, locking her movements. Lyra, dignity unbroken, faced the jeering, leering crowd that filled the secondary arena. The three of them, champion, shield, and leader, stood surrounded, once again, at the mercy of monsters. Mason woke on a cold slab, the taste of copper in his mouth, and the ache of old wounds blooming across his body. His hands clenched at empty air, no knife, no pistol, nothing but the unfamiliar weight of arena-issue armor strapped to his chest and limbs. He sat up, vision swimming, and the harsh lights above flickered to life. A monitor on the wall buzzed to life with Karn's segmented face looming, expression unreadable. "A fine show," Karn said, voice rippling with smug amusement. "You'll fight my champion next. Survive, and we'll talk about your friends." Mason glared at the screen, forcing the stiffness from his limbs. "If I refuse?" Karn's mandibles twitched, almost a smile. The view shifted. Zephyra, strapped to a cold steel table, her body tense beneath a web of containment fields. White-coated scientists hovered, instruments gleaming, ready to begin. "The process is painful," Karn purred. Mason's jaw tightened. Karn was relentless. The screen flickered again. Lyra, radiant but defiant, stood on a raised dais, surrounded by a hungry crowd of bidders, gang lords, syndicate lieutenants, shadowy dignitaries, all eager to claim her as their prize. "Fight, or watch them become trophies," Karn finished. The monitor went dark. Mason's fists clenched until his knuckles blanched. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a slow breath, pushing away the fear and rage. This was a cage, but he'd broken worse. Elsewhere, in a private cell walled with shimmering energy, Lyra regarded her captors with cool poise. She turned to the assembled scientists, her voice calm and commanding. "I require privacy to prepare for your procedures. My people demand dignity, even in defeat." Karn, observing from a private booth, cocked his head, curious. "Grant her request," he ordered. The scientists withdrew, doors hissing shut, leaving Lyra alone. The cell's silence hummed with tension as Karn's holoprojector materialized before her. She faced him with regal composure. "Let's speak as equals, Karn." He regarded her, intrigued. "You surprise me, Ambassador. Not many attempt negotiation at the edge of a blade." "Azuria has resources you can't imagine," Lyra replied, her bioluminescence flaring with purpose. "My capture was a test. I wanted to see who in Gossamer would betray us, who would risk the Accord for power." "Diplomacy does not move me," Karn interrupted, voice icy. "I'm not offering diplomacy," Lyra replied. "I offer partnership." "Zephyra is only one of many. I can deliver more in exchange for our freedom." Karn's mandibles clicked with interest. "Why release my greatest prizes?" "Because a willing ally is worth more than a caged one," Lyra said, eyes flashing. "And because my beacon is already active, if I disappear, Azuria's fleets will come for you." Karn paused, calculations flickering in his gaze. In the depths of the arena, Mason waited in the shadowed entry, the roar of the crowd rising in waves, pulsing through the walls. The doors slid open. He stepped into the blood-stained sand, the lights blinding, the air thick with the scent of iron and ozone. Karn's champion awaited at the far end, a brute twice Mason's size, 4 arms corded with muscle, hideous armor studded with grisly trophies, teeth, claws, scalps. The brute's breath steamed in the cold air. The announcer's voice boomed, "Human versus undefeated champion, no rules, no mercy." The crowd howled, hungry for violence. Mason rolled his shoulders, ignoring the sting of his healing wounds. The brute wasted no time, launching forward with a guttural roar. Its upper pair of claws slashed in a wide arc. Mason dodged, feeling the air part by inches. The brute's lower fists hammered down. Mason ducked, rolled, slashed with his arena knife, scoring a shallow cut across the champion's thigh. The brute roared, spinning, claws raking Mason's side. Blood soaked his shirt, hot and slick. He gasped, pain blurring his vision, but refused to fall. High above, in her cell, Zephyra jolted upright, feeling Mason's pain through the strange bond that had grown between them. She focused, her breathing slowing. She could feel the containment energy pulsing around her, feeding into her skin, her bones. She willed the energy inward, channeling it through her body. Sparks danced along her fingers. With a shudder, she redirected the surge, shorting out the restraints. The table's locks popped open. Zephyra slid to the ground, every muscle vibrating with power. Back in the arena, Mason changed tactics, letting the brute come to him, taking the pain, each blow opening a gap, each wound a distraction. He drew the champion in close, baiting him, then drove an elbow into the brute's solar plexus. The champion howled, lashing out with renewed fury. Mason let himself be slammed into the sand, feigning weakness. When the brute leaned in for the kill, Mason thrust his knife upward, cracking the chest armor. In Karn's control room, a guard burst in, voice urgent. "Security breach in Sector 9. The Azurians escaped." "Lock down!" Karn barked, slamming his fist against the console. Mason, battered and bleeding, saw his chance. He let his left arm be caught by the brute's blade, pain screaming up his nerves. Gritting his teeth, he drove his knife into the champion's heart. The brute convulsed, eyes wide in shock, then toppled. The crowd erupted, half in rage, half in awe. Guards flooded the sand, plasma rifles leveled. Mason raised his chin. "Champion requests audience with Karn," he called, invoking the ancient right of the arena. The guards hesitated, tradition binding them. They seized him, but not with cruelty. He had earned the right to face Karn. As Mason was led away, alarms shrieked through the apex. Security feeds flickered, showing Zephyra cutting through guards in the laboratories, her blade a comet of blue energy. She carved a path toward Lyra's cell, leaving stunned and broken enemies in her wake. Mason broke free of his escort with a well-timed elbow, racing up the service stairs toward the executive level. His wounds screamed, blood dripping from his fingertips, but he forced himself onward. He burst into Karn's opulent gallery, pistol drawn. The room was chaos. Lyra's cell stood open. Zephyra knelt over a pile of stunned guards, her blade humming with residual energy. Karn stood by the controls, sneering, his compound eyes cold. "One last match," Karn said, voice sharp as a razor. "Win, and they go free. Lose, and your shield stays with me." Zephyra stepped forward, jaw set. "He's hurt." "Silence," Karn snapped, venom in his tone. 4 opponents, 10 minutes. Win, they're free. He gestured, and guards dragged Zephyra back, yanking her away from Mason. Lyra's eyes widened, fear warring with hope. Mason's chest rose and fell, every breath a struggle. He looked at Zephyra, then at Lyra, then back at Karn. "Deal." Zephyra's eyes shone with dread. "No, you're injured," she pleaded. Mason caught her chin, lifting it gently, gaze burning with unspoken promise. "They have you. They have her. This ends now." Karn's guards dragged Zephyra away. Med drones buzzed around Mason, nanites cleansing his wounds in a burning rush. He bit back a cry, refusing to give Karn the satisfaction. Lyra caught Mason's gaze, her lips shaping silent words. "Be safe." As Mason was let out, Zephyra's voice trembled, echoing across the room. "You're not alone." He looked back one last time, a crooked smile twisting his lips. "Get her to the exit, I'll win." The doors closed and the arena waited. In the prep bay, Mason checked his gear with steady hands. Every buckle, every blade, every seam. He ran through the motions with a calm born of necessity. Across the comm, Zephyra's voice crackled, low and taut with concern. "Tell me the plan." Mason pressed the calm bead to his lips, eyes never leaving the gleaming rows of enemy weapons beyond the blast doors. First two, brutes, one with crushing gauntlets, one with a whip. Third, armored beast. Last, four, armed, champion. Zephyra's image shimmered on the glass, her brows knitted in worry. "You'll be outnumbered." He smiled, just a hint of mischief in his eyes, and palmed a small device, slipping it through the security slot toward her. "Thanks," he said. It was a disruptor grenade, a secret weapon for a desperate cause. Before the match, they met at the viewport, separated by reinforced glass but close enough to touch. Their hands pressed palm to palm, warmth radiating through the cold barrier. Their eyes met, words unnecessary, a silent vow passing between them, fierce and unbreakable. The hatch opened with a hydraulic hiss, and the roar of the arena crashed over Mason in a tidal wave of sound. He drew his blades, the cold steel steady in his grip. Floodlights swept the sands, and the announcer's voice thundered above the crowd. "Ultimatum match, Mason versus 4. No rules, no surrender." The gates clanged open. First came the brute with gauntlets, a hulking mass of muscle and malice. Next, a whip-armed beast, its long, sinewy tail tipped with razors. Then, the six-limbed predator, a nightmare of claws and teeth. Last, the reigning champion, four-armed, armored, every movement calculated and cruel. The brute charged first, gauntlets raised. Mason sidestepped the crushing blow, his blade flashing to slash the joint at the wrist. Metal sheared, and the brute howled, staggering as blood spattered the sand. The whip cracked, slicing the air where Mason's head had been. He ducked, rolling beneath the brute's arm, using his momentum to vault onto the predator's back. The crowd roared as Mason hurled the disruptor grenade at the armored beast's foot. It detonated with a pulse of blue light, shorting servos and sending the behemoth crashing into the brute. The two went down in a heap, metal and flesh tangling, the sand shaking with their fall. The whip lashed out again, coiling around Mason's arm. He spun with the motion, pulling the beast off balance and severed the whip mid-strike with a quick flick of his blade. Sparks danced as the weapon fell in two pieces. Now the champion moved in, four arms whirling blades, every step measured. Mason met him head-on, steel ringing against steel. Sparks flew, the clangor echoing in Mason's skull. The champion pressed him back, slashing with upper blades while the lower pair jabbed at Mason's ribs. Mason gritted his teeth, feeling every ache and bruise from earlier battles, and waited for his opening. He feinted left, took a glancing cut to his shoulder, then dropped low, driving his knife into the champion's exposed power core. The champion froze, eyes wide in disbelief, then collapsed. A stunned silence fell, broken only by the sound of Mason's ragged breathing. Then, the victory gong sounded, thunderous and final. The crowd erupted. Mason staggered from the sand, every limb trembling, blood slicking his armor. He forced himself toward Lyra's cell, every step a test of will. The field around her shimmered and died. Lyra rushed to him, arms wide, her face luminous with relief. Zephyra appeared moments later, emotion raw and open on her face. Mason dropped to one knee, the exhaustion catching up to him. Lyra embraced him fiercely, her bioluminescent skin casting gentle light over his battered form. Zephyra knelt at his side, hand finding his. "I knew you would," she whispered, voice breaking with pride and gratitude. In the shadow of Karn's shattered arena, the three regrouped, bruised, battered, but alive. Alarms shrieked throughout the tunnels, red lights spinning as chaos spread. Sarah, the maintenance tech, appeared, urgency in her step. "Captain's quarters above. Hit the guards, reach the power node, Disable the lockdown. Zephyra nodded, her resolve sharpening. Mason moved to the rear, covering their retreat as they hurried through the maze of corridors. They emerged on a balcony above the holding pens, where rows of captive fighters watched with dull, hopeless eyes. Zephyra stepped forward, voice ringing over the chaos. Brothers, sisters, rise with us, freedom or chains. A beat of silence. Then, from the crowd, a voice called out, Freedom! Others joined, their cries swelling into a deafening roar as Zephyra sliced open the first cage. Below, Mason and Lyra sprinted for the power node, ducking blaster fire and dodging debris. Inside the control room, Mason severed the main lines with a well-placed strike. All over the complex, locks clanked open. Fighters spilled from their cages, overwhelming stunned security teams. Within minutes, the sublevel was theirs. Zephyra stood at the railing, eyes fixed on the main arena's massive gates. That's the way out. Move! Mason joined her, breathing hard. Lead them. Lyra and I will clear the path. Zephyra sheathed her blade, her posture regal and unyielding, and raced ahead with the freed prisoners behind her. They ascended, the air thick with the smell of smoke and freedom. On a landing, two arena masters barred their way, tall, armored, faces hidden behind mirrored masks. Mason struck first, disarming one with a sharp twist. Lyra moved in, her foot snapping into the other's knee. Zephyra's hands crackled with blue energy. She reached out, and one guard simply disintegrated. The masters broke, fleeing before the righteous fury of the rebels. Mason fired a concussive blast at the staircase, sending rubble cascading and sealing off pursuit. Rebels poured up and out, the tide of revolution unstoppable. At the massive gates, Lyra stepped forward, her bioluminescence flaring as she wove her light into the ancient locks. One by one, the doors clicked and swung open. Zephyra reappeared, leading the charge, her hair wild, eyes blazing. She threw herself into Mason's arms. He caught her and spun, laughter and tears mingling. Lyra joined them, her hand warm in Mason's. We made it, Mason breathed. The arena trembled, the foundations giving way. Debris rained from above. It's coming down, Zephyra shouted. Move! They dashed through collapsing corridors, Lyra's glow guiding the way. A fallen beam pinned a cluster of rebels. Zephyra bent, muscles straining, and lifted it clear. Mason and Lyra pulled the freed captives through. They slid into an emergency tunnel just as the arena above caved in, thunder shaking the earth. They emerged into the wasteland, dawn breaking over ruined towers. The prisoners spilled out, voices raised in wild, disbelieving cheers. Mason pulled Zephyra close, arms encircling her, and Lyra embraced them both. We did it, Zephyra whispered, her voice ragged with joy. Mason smiled, drawing her into a long, desperate kiss as Lyra wrapped her arms around them. For a moment there was nothing but warmth and victory. Night fell over Gossamer, cool and clear. In a rebel hideout beneath the broken city, Lyra stood before the gathered crowd. We must return to Azuria. Vera is no sanctuary. Her words rang with authority, sparking applause and hope in every heart. Zephyra watched Lyra with pride, her eyes shining. Mason moved to her side, squeezing her hand. Lyra stepped down, drawing closer, her expression softening. I need you both, she said, her gaze steady. Mason looked to Zephyra, hope blazing in his eyes. Then we go together. The next day, rebel ships lifted off in formation. Mason and Zephyra boarded the Azurian flagship, its silver hull gleaming in the dawn. Lyra, resplendent in ceremonial garb, oversaw the launch from the bridge. Zephyra fastened her gear with practiced hands. We're really doing this, she whispered. Mason tucked Lyra's insignia into his pocket. Yeah. Light and steel. Zephyra smiled, love radiant in her eyes. Lyra approached, holding out wreaths woven from starlight and hope. Let these remind you, steel bent to hope. Mason placed the wreath on Zephyra's head. She crowned him in return. Lyra joined their hands, her touch a promise. Ready? She asked. They nodded as one. On the launch pad, the ship thrummed with rising power. Mason stood by Zephyra, shoulders brushing, Lyra's hand clasped in theirs. The countdown began. Sarah waved from the platform, tears shining. May the stars guide you. Zephyra squeezed Mason's hand. I never thought freedom would feel like this. Mason looked at her, awe in his voice. Neither did I. The engines flared, the ship shuddered, and the flagship soared skyward. The battered city fell away, left behind but not forgotten. Inside, Lyra activated the helm, guiding them into the star-streaked void. At the viewport, Mason and Zephyra stood side by side, hands entwined, watching as the universe opened before them. Lyra smiled, her heart full. Mason pressed his forehead to Zephyra's, voice quiet and fierce. Whatever comes, we face it together. Zephyra leaned into him, her breath mingling with his. Always. Lyra turned to the controls but glanced back, seeing two souls bound by light and steel, ready for whatever the universe held. That's the end of the story. Please do not forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and write in the comments what you liked most about this story. Our team will be very grateful to you. You can find even more fascinating stories on our channel. See you in the next video.